Thank you so much to all of you for being here. It really is a treat to see everyone in person. Just so good to see you. Thank you for coming, for traveling, and for your willingness to serve as a part of this board. This is the Utah League of Cities and Towns Board of Directors meeting. Today is Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. My name is Dawn Ramsey, and I'm the mayor of South Jordan and president this year of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And if you who watch this later will see that we've got some of the best public leaders and public servants in the state here as part of this board, and the staff that works with us. Thank you so much for being here, all of you. Very first, new member of our board, and we have an outgoing member. So Colleen Mulvey of Cedar Hills, where's Colleen? Over here, right back here. We are going to thank you for your service. You will, of course, continue doing what you do professionally, but thank you so much for your time here with us. And we are going to welcome Jackie Nostrom, who is the city recorder in Harriman. Right? I'm right. Okay. I'm like, no, I got that right. Okay. She is the new Municipal Clerks Association president, right? And an ex officio member of this board. And so we thank you and we welcome you and thank you for being here. Appreciate it. All right. Some administrative items. The minutes have been sent out from our September 19th, 2022 meeting. Anybody had a chance to review those minutes, and are there any amendments you'd like to see made? Any questions? And if not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
That we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Okay, good motion by Mayor Kapusi and a second by Mayor Monson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from September 19th, 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. All right, just a reminder that the conflict of interest forms are available, and if anybody's had anything change in your life and any new conflict to report or potential conflict you'd like to report, please go ahead and fill that out, and you can give it to Nick or whoever, but we appreciate that. Also, just be mindful, we've included in the packet a schedule of the board meetings for the 2022-2023 year that will start November. Those meetings start November, yeah. So just take note of that, and it might affect all of us a little differently. It might not even affect some of us at all. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. We don't know exactly yet, but the schedule for the next year is in the packet. So you can refer to that. We're going to turn it over to our fearless leader, Cameron Deal, our executive director, for his report. Actually, I'm thrilled that this is first because Cam usually ends up with about 14 seconds at the end of our overtime meeting, and he never gets to give his report, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you. Take it away.
This will give everybody a chance to finish their food before we get to the deliberation. But first and foremost, thank you for taking time to join us this week. We know it is a large time commitment that you're taking away from your daily life, your family life, your city life, your civic life, and everything else to spend this 48-hour window with us, plus travel time. And we greatly appreciate it and hope that you'll find it valuable and be able to take some worthwhile things back to your city. So thank you for your service on this board, because it adds another hour and a half of meetings. Mayor Daines, I'm going to turn the time over to Mayor Daines briefly.
Mayor Ramsey, would you stand up? Just on, can anyone imagine how many meetings she attends on our behalf and is such a great representative for all of us at the legislature, wherever. So this is just a little thank you for you for all the time you spend on our behalf.
Thank you.
I don't have a fruit basket or anything like that, but I would like to offer a toast to that, our league director and staff before we start, because they do an amazing job for this organization and for each of our communities. They're so careful about traveling around the state to visit so many of our communities and really listen and advocate for us effectively. So thank you very much. And here's to you guys.
Now I'm going to pop this Diet Coke open right now so I can join you in that chair. And that's not the only reason, but then it opens the eyes to be part of the chair. Yeah, technically more. Thank you. Thank you. tend to know what I'm in for when I walk into situations. I try to be as prepared as possible and know the answer before I ask the question, and I didn't see this coming, so that's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Daines, and again, thanks to everyone for your contributions. And Mayor Ramsey, she's remarked to me on a couple of occasions that she's going to miss our carpools around the state, and then I reminded her that she's still going to be mayor. She's still representing cities on the UEOC, and we're still going to see a lot of each other at the Capitol. So
I'll probably still come and hang out at your board meetings, even like a year from now when I start to roll off.
I have her on speed dial.
Yeah.
okay, I still will do. I actually am going to shrink down the executive director report so that we can get to the meat of the meeting. But I want to turn it over briefly to Nick Jarvis and Katie Harley. Just give a 30-second overview of the number of attendees and then the number of sponsors that are here. Recognizing that number is in a little influx because we had some people registered today. So just a ballpark number of attendees and the sponsors that we had and the status of the exhibit hall.
It's all great. Last we had checked, we had broken the last number we had. We have over 600.
Yeah, probably 630 attendees for this conference compared to like a high 500, which is great considering mid-year was also a record breaker on attendance. So that was awesome. Our exhibit hall, we sold out all of the booths on top of adding additional sponsors this year. Not everybody was present, though we don't have all of the sponsors in the exhibit hall, but it's 80 booths total, which is the most that we've also had too. So it's been good. That's good.
Yeah. So Katie's being understated. It's beyond good. It's phenomenal. Because you gave us direction back in the spring when we set the budget about increasing our aggressiveness in the convention programming and convention revenue space. And so we're excited to be able to come back and say we delivered on that this fall. And when I say we, yes, it's a team effort, but Katie in particular and Nick and his team really done a tremendous job. Angela, Adam, and Rachel Terry, our deputy director, and everyone who's involved behind the scenes on the conference, Susan Wood and John Park. I did very little on the conference, and I'm proud to say that because we have enough staff and that they can handle a lot of those pieces so that I don't have to be involved in it. And you saw a very professional day one, and we're excited for day two and day three. And our goal is to keep and maintain those sponsors and those exhibitors into 2023 and beyond. Yeah, that's remember.
Walking around with visitors today and asking them what if this experience is a little bit different. I think having the passport was really an idea. They feel that it's more engaging for them as well, even if they don't have anything that we need in particular. Still, just having the conversation makes it worth their while, and I think they even just after this first day, they're seeing that it was worth it for them.
Excellent. That was all Katie. So thank you for expanding our staff bandwidth a couple of years ago so we could create this position for Katie, and kudos to Nick and his team and to Rachel. Hiring her as deputy has also freed up a lot of bandwidth as we've organized internally. And I think you saw the results that we were able to increase our revenues, increase our sponsorships, increase exhibitors, and increase attendance. So we hope to continue that. We recognize the economy is shifting and there'll be things outside of our control come 2023, but we're really excited about this event. The second item on the league business side is we do need this board to approve the credentials committee for purposes of voting on Friday. We changed the bylaws a few years ago to allow for league staff to just serve as the credentials committee. It's much easier that way. So we just need a motion to appoint the credentials committee, which is basically league staff checking people in on Friday for purposes of voting on the resolutions and on the upcoming board and officers.
Okay, with that, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to approve the credentials committee as we have established it.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember and Mayor, appreciate both of you. Any discussion, questions, concerns? All right. All in favor of approving the credentials committee the way we have established it, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go. Thank you.
Terrific. Then on the nominations committee update, we don't release the names of who has been nominated. Actually have not seen that list because that comes on Friday. But what I want to point out to the board today is that we had more applicants for the board than we've ever had. The nominations committee had to go from 22 applicants for 6 at-large, go through 22 applicants for 6 at-large spots, 6 candidates for second VP for 1 spot. And the list was filled with rock stars, including many people in this room. So I just wanted to say thank you to those of you who are serving on the board now, who have reapplied to serve on the board regardless of the outcome, and those of you who served on the nominations committee, because it was additional time, additional effort. But I think it speaks highly of this group, that people want to be part of this group. And so thank you for all of you who contributed and have contributed in some form or fashion in the nominations process, particularly the chair this year, our second vice president, Mayor Kafusi. They actually had 2 meetings so they could discuss the candidates because they had so many to make sure that they were doing all the consideration. So thank you, Mayor Kafusi, for that. The last thing in the executive director report is just upcoming key dates. You can see a lot of moving parts around the UEOC and CHA. We'll get to that in a second. The league officers, starting next week, we'll resume our meetings with the governor's staff, and then we'll be meeting with editorial boards to talk about growth issues. And then if anyone is interested in going to National League of Cities in Kansas City, just let me know. I know your staff have reached out, so we just need to coordinate that. We do host a state night on the Friday night at this NLC conference. In Washington, we usually get a decent number. We had a record number this past spring of almost 100. The fall conference, there's usually about 10, so it's a much smaller group that goes. But if anybody's planning on going, just let us know so we can handle the state night logistics in November. And that's all I've got for the executive director report.
Okay, thank you. If I can really quick just sidebar and say that today, our deputy city manager said to me, I heard you guys had a lot of people who wanted to, like, who applied to be part of the board, you know, for the league. And I said, yeah, like 3 times more than there was seats for, or something like that, you know, quite a few, maybe 4 times. And I said, there were a lot, I'm told. And he said, it's because the bar has been so raised, the group you have. And he said, what it's become over the last few years, he said, I've been here for a long time. And he said, this has grown into something that people really want to be part of. It's become very influential. It's become very prestigious to be a part of. And he said, the group that you've got and what you've been able to do the last number of years, he said, it's been remarkable to watch. And he said, I'm not surprised at all that you had that, but it didn't used to be that way. And he said, just pass along from me that you guys have all done a great job. And those who have gone before us the last couple of years to really help elevate the stature of what this role means and the influence that it carries. So thank you to all of you. All right. We don't have to do anything else.
Nope.
That's done. Good. All right. Look, we're just flying through. Number 4, your land, your plan. We're going to turn it over to Rachel Terry, our deputy director, to talk about public assets for healthier communities with an update on that. Where is Rachel? There she is.
Yes, so as you may recall from the previous board meeting, Your Land, Your Plan is a program that is made possible through a grant from Intermountain Healthcare and then with support from Zions Bank. And the program that we're developing is this robust educational opportunity where there'll be curriculum that's provided on how to better utilize publicly owned real estate that's within your city or maybe owned by another entity. So we have contracted with it's an organization called Urban 3. Joe Minicozy has presented here before. He's sort of the rock star in sort of urban planning, if that's a thing. So we are contracting with their entity, and they're going to develop the curriculum, and they're going to come out and provide the curriculum. We will also have materials. We'll also have the video recording so that we can use it again and again. In addition, you will see there's a piece of that contract that says they'll advise on legislation as asked. We anticipate there may be some legislation coming related to public assets, and that they will provide some workshop support, and also that they'll work with another, Chuck Moreau, who will be our keynote tomorrow, is also potentially a partner on this project. We'll formalize that, but you'll see sort of the rates and the details of the contract. It's hourly rates, but also they'll provide 8 workshops plus the supporting curriculum. So that is a contract that's been given to you. if there's any questions after the answer.
Thank you. No other questions, sorry.
So we just, Mayor, because of the size of the contract, we just need to have the
Take a
board.
Motion to
yeah.
vote to approve it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh, sorry, and if I may add, that we do have a date from them for our first workshop, it'll be January 9th, and then the rest are to be determined, but that's the official rollout date. And we'll announce that at the conference tomorrow, that people can register starting tomorrow, because we previewed this project in our mid-year, we previewed it in webinar, and it's going live on Friday in the business session. And Zines and IHC will be discussing it tomorrow during the lunch general session.
great. Thank you. I will ask if there's a motion and ask for a motion to approve the contract with the Urban 3 for Your Land, Your Plan curriculum. That's what the contract is, right? To approve the contract with them on this initiative. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mayor. Is there can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, motion second by Gary. All right, any discussion, questions?
Are we taking an administrative fee on any of the money that's coming in?
We've not described it as an administrative fee, but yes, we are getting some of it. We are helping Meg Ryan, our senior land use manager. This is going to help fund some of her position for the 2 years that we have the grant. So rather than a flat administrative fee, it's directly as a portion of what percentage of her work is related to this will be funded out of that.
Great question.
And,
Thank you.
and Mayor, if I may add, you mentioned Meg specifically, but that possibility also exists for other staffers. As we've been rolling this program out, it has the ability of potentially consuming 1 or 2 FTEs in order to really maximize it. So we're going to be very conscientious of that. And if a staff member is dedicating significant time, making sure we're covering that through these funds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Great question, Marshall. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving this contract with the Your Land, Your Plan curriculum, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Passes. Yeah. All right, advocacy and engagement updates. I'll take just a really quick second to give an update on how Unified Economic Opportunity Commission went last week, and then we're going to turn it over to the staff. Everybody's been involved, Cameron and Carson, whoever else you have speak.
We're glad you survived.
Oh my goodness, right? I have the scars every time, right? It is the hot seat there, representing cities at the UEOC. It just is. There's good people who serve, good people with good intentions who want to do good things for the state. We just have a unique perspective from local government that is absolutely imperative and is maybe easy to be overlooked by anyone who has not sat in this seat before, who hasn't done this work. And so, you know, it's what we do. It's what we do. But there were a couple of significant successes, and then all its too. So it's okay. But the feedback that came back from this board and also from our survey with LPC really played a role, right? And that's how we formulated what we would vote yes on in concept. It's not, these aren't firm policy proposals that are clearly written and defined. There will be more discussion, but the policy concepts as has been presented, we had enough feedback that we discussed all of them, that we were able to make a vote based on what you said and what our other members said, and the direction that was given. But we had the biggest concern with one of the pieces from the Commission on Housing Affordability, which was all the subsections that you just discussed in the caucuses, right? You saw the whole list under HB 462. Let's also look at XYZ, all these things, several things. I appreciate Senator Lincoln Fillmore, who is now co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability, who presented it and said outright, I think the first piece I presented and the second piece I presented are prepared for a vote, and the third piece is not. That's not what that group wanted to hear, and the staff for that group definitely didn't want to hear that. They wanted to move it along. They're like, we have a date and it has to be done by this date. And the day before, I had a really good conversation, direct conversation with Senator Fillmore and asked him to work with us and to give us more time. And I asked if he would be supportive of a counter motion by me, a substitute motion, to table that until the next meeting in November and give more time for vetting some of those issues and proposals, not just for us to vet with the CHA, but they hadn't even fully vetted all of them yet. And anyway, he proposed it. I didn't even have to make a substitute motion. And he said, I think the first two things I presented on are ready for a vote, and I don't think the third one is. And then I was able to piggyback on that. Together, we were able to get that tabled to our November meeting, which was significant because that was the only portion that the speaker and the president were part of the meeting for. Both were absent, but they both joined by phone, and they wanted to be there to hear that part. So it was significant, right? That anybody who was there knows what a big deal it was that we were able to make that happen. Because we do need more time because it's not properly vetted. Everything else, we were able to take your direction and say, we've talked through these things and we were supportive of concepts, but I pointed out really clearly some exceptions as well and said, this one has the developer infrastructure districts. We haven't even had any discussion about that. And I didn't say, plus the language just was finally handed to us yesterday and it's barely concept language of one paragraph and they haven't discussed it either. I didn't say that, but that's essentially what I meant, you know, but I just, we really are concerned and want a lot more discussion on that. We haven't had the opportunity to have any discussion about that. And so that clarifier was put in there. And now there's a lot of work to do, because the CHA will meet again November 8th, I think, something like that. And we meet the, I don't know, 28th or something of November to vote for the UEOC. And it will definitely, the vote will be taken. And it was made clear that we've got a lot of work to do. We've been given this period of time, a grace period, if you will, to continue to come to the table and work things out. And if we maybe don't maximize that opportunity, it's not going to be good for us. Because there's no guarantees that what they're proposing right now is what they'll go with. There's potential and there's room over the next period of time to make it even more punitive or something that we like even less, right? And so we've got a lot of work to do. That's the update. You all saw the quote that the speaker made. And Kate was very nice today and said, you were very diplomatic there. And I said, thank you. Be so proud of my straight face that I had, that I just sat there and didn't have an opportunity to rebut some of the comments that were made, but that wasn't the right place to do it. But we've got a lot of work to do. I think we've got a lot of work to do. And so now I'm going to turn it over to the staff and let you really kind of fill us in.
So I just want to give some flavor of this. So I've been just sitting in on that attainability subgroup, which is looking at housing that's basically the highest part of affordability, 80% to 120% of AMI. So the kind of housing that doesn't necessarily require a lot of subsidy. And that committee is chaired by Chris Brugus, and he pretty much, I'll just say the flavor of it is he would make proposals of things that Cameron, and to the extent that I could do that, or the other city people would say, well, that is problematic because of this consequence, that would get these other problems that I don't think you considered. And the way the conversation went, there were only about 3 people in the whole committee talking about anything. And at the end of the day, Chris wanted people to vote on it and was basically telling Cam and me, well, you guys are going to get your say when this goes to legislature. So you don't get to talk about it now. It's crazy.
Cameron, Mayor,
You may
I
not
finally-
chew.
So finally got that pastry I wanted.
I know.
I get to spend this good amount of time at the Capitol with my day job, because I get to watch all of the staff up close lobbying in the hallways. I get to watch Mayor Ramsey and some of the others that are up there regularly. The work they have put in over the summer on the UEOC and the gazillion work groups and subgroups that are contained within the UEOC is nothing short of phenomenal. They have met the point, and with well-reasoned responses for everything that has been thrown at them. in a way that I think we should be proud of, because they've met anecdotal stories with real facts, which is always the harder part of the battle. The lobbying work that they were doing in the lead up to that UVOC meeting last week was phenomenal. You know, it's been a little bit mystifying to me that the county representative, the UVOC, has not always voted with us on some of these issues. The work done to make sure that that the counties saw their common fight with us on some of these issues was amazing. It's always, you know, in a legislative committee, when they move the agenda purposely to fit the schedule of the speaker and the president, that they are going to move something through that you probably don't like. And it looked like they were prepared to do that. But for the work that Ramsey had done with Senator Fillmore, and the work that Cam and the staff had done to hold that line, to use those relationships, to apply all of this great reason, fact, and logic about these land use decisions. And it was a lobbying moment to be really proud of our team, quite frankly, since I got to sit in the back of the room and watch that and share incredibly fun and complete text messages with them about public processes. And there are victories that come along. Sometimes they're small battle victories. This was one of them. That doesn't mean our work's cut out for us, but it was really masterfully done by our executive committee and by our lobbying team, from someone who sits in the hallway and gets to see those things up close. And I feel like I needed to share that with all of you who don't get to sit, you know, up at the Capitol, who are just so incredibly lucky to sit at the Capitol.
Bravo team.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And really the most important piece is that we were able to highlight that the proposals that came forward, not only were they bad for local government, but they weren't good policy, period. And one thing that the governor said, and I actually chatted with him about this in the ballroom earlier today, was he said we need to have bold and good policy. And I reminded him this morning, we hear you. We agree with you that we need bold and good policy, but the emphasis needs to be on good policy. And he actually chuckled and he said, yep, you're right, and I trust you guys to figure it out. So that's what he said to us this morning, and we intend to hold him to that. Now, and what happens next is the all-important question, so that what happened last week wasn't for naught. And that's over the next 5 weeks, well, now next 4 weeks, are what I'm calling our counter proposal on housing, some of which are ideas we've already discussed, but we just couldn't get anywhere in that attainable group, as Mayor Silvestrini pointed out. Now we've been able to get it out of that group and into a broader audience. And what we need to do over the next 45 minutes or so is make sure that you as a board define clearly the sandbox for us on a couple of really important items, so that we can be drafting proposals that fit within that sandbox and meet our principles and meet the governor at the bold and good policy outcome that he described. Nick, will you go down to slide 29? Or not slide, I guess page 29. Or you just click, yeah, just click on.
You tell me where, I've got the power.
That's perfect. Now just go down.
Thank you.
So there's the UEOC structure that we've discussed. Keep going. The dates, I basically just updated from last board meeting and crossed out. There's our framing questions that you approved a while back. Okay, this is what we presented to you last time. And everything in the red and orange, basically on the far right, is the PRC proposal that the CHA group endorsed. Okay, UEOC has not voted on it, but the CHA group endorsed, and we expressed our opposition to those. The concepts in the middle were things we talked about at the last meeting that now we have taken the next step. And Nick, now you can go to the next slide. And my staff has mocked me about the tables and the color coding, and that's fine, mock away. But we're trying to have it all in one screen in an effort to help simplify all the moving parts. So the first piece of our counter proposal is the development standards piece. Sean Guzman's been point person for us on it. We're not going to talk about this one here because we've talked about it in multiple settings. The second piece is the legislative authority around referendums and potentially the higher signature threshold. Again, we've talked about that one. We're not going to lead out on that, but if the legislature goes there, then the legislature can go there. Item 3, the administrative land use authority, we feel like could be the backbone really of this counter proposal. And it's why we spent the time in caucuses a couple of hours ago getting broad feedback from the membership on this piece. This morning, Todd Godfrey, Sean, others, and I presented this concept to the Municipal Attorneys Association to get their feedback so we can start drafting. But that's where we're at now, is we need to be at the drafting phase starting, I was about to say tomorrow, that's dramatic, and tomorrow's a busy day. So Todd, how's your Saturday morning? Never mind. How's next week? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the youths kick off at 1:30. So, yeah, but my point is we've got to be drafting because we need to have a proposal ready by LPC on October 17th, so we can come back to our members and say this is where we want to go, and then sit down with Broad Rights Coalition, have a couple of weeks to negotiate before we get to the trial on November 8th. Now, what is highlighted up there, and I admit I didn't realize that we were having a United Nations meeting, so I don't have my glasses and I can't see that end of the room.
And I do have
I've
my
got
glasses.
my screen. But you know what we highlighted here was public input. So the role of public input, role of legislative body, role of the appeal body. Now we've talked about all 3 of those things extensively today with the attorneys and with caucuses. So Mayor, my question for this group, based on what you either heard of municipal, well, actually, Todd, can I put you on the spot and just give a quick summary of what we heard from the attorneys?
Yeah, I think there is some general agreement that we can work within an administrative arena to clarify administrative land use processes, right? And to even move towards standardizing those to some extent. So we talked specifically about changing the public input model a little bit from the traditional public hearing to maybe a public comment period that would stay open for a period of time. We did broach a little bit the idea of changing the land use authority on some of these administrative decisions. That didn't have as much, I guess I would say, support as just defining the processes. So that's where the discussion went, and I think they were favorable towards considering those things.
Then in our caucus meetings this afternoon, we posed that question, and I know, Mayor, you went to each of them. I can only speak to mine, but in the caucus of the cities in first and second class, I'm going to have to go as far as saying that there was significant support to explore improving the clarity on the process side, and even a willingness to look at not all administrative actions, but we talked about site plan review and we talked about final plat review as ones that maybe are worth clarifying in state code and the role of the legislative body therein. Now, that's different from the quick reports that I've heard from the other caucuses, but Justin, I know you were in rapid growth. Do you or any Councilman Redford's chuckling, but anything you guys want to share?
I would not say there was support for Mayor Ramsey stopped in.
Like I stopped at all of them, and I'm like,
No, there was they pulled back any kind of public comment when we talked about public comment being written over a time period versus in person. They said if it's both, maybe, but not interested in pulling back the public hearing. They were about 13. I'm not worried. Yeah. Yes, that's a good way of saying it.
And that was on the input piece. That wasn't even the role of the legislative body. That was just on the input piece, right? Other thoughts from people in like
there was some discussion around the legislative body wrapped up in that, but it wasn't as explicit.
Any quick reports from established midsize or the other caucuses? Small.
Established midsize was part of in line with first and second caucuses. We also would like to be called mature cities.
Prove it. Yeah. And then feedback from the resort community caucus or the rural caucus.
You know, I don't think there's a whole lot of support for it. It didn't go over very well. I think they were trying to figure out where and why this is coming from. Is the legislature trying to streamline things because of the input from the developers in the state? And if we're trying to streamline it, I don't know, there just wasn't a lot of support.
In the rural caucus, I don't think there was a lot of support. We talked about it and I tried to kind of lead them to this discussion. And it just kept coming back that, part of our, when it comes to public input and things like that, part of our responsibility is to educate our decision makers why they're taking public input, which is collect information about the count houses. And that part of it is to educate our public about why they're taking input. But no real changes, no real suggestions.
We have our work cut out for us. There's not a consensus amongst the groups. I was amazed what going back and forth between the different ones and hearing the differences.
And also, as I'm looking at it as, will my council buy this? Because I agree with some of this, but if I go back to my council, they're gonna push back and they want control of it. So.
I would say the resorts with Carson, they were surprisingly, after we talked about it, an understanding of the administrative process and their false. I think there was a feeling of, yeah, we probably should be involved in other stuff that we've already decided as far as policy. But I think there was also a sense of efficiency is not the only virtue there. Part of it is bringing the public, which basically is short circuited. I thought our own parenthetical problem. When I said the legislature is not holding public hearings on bills, we got 2 minutes for this, and each side gets 30 seconds. I'll take 2 minutes.
So then bring it back. Any other comments from board members, from observations from the caucus discussions? Let's go with Gary and then Councilmember. Is that right?
Sure. I think I'm going to be bold enough to speak for the city managers, even though I think
that conversation tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yep.
But I think there is a feeling from the city managers, generally speaking, that administrative decisions need to be considered by administrative professionals or administrative bodies. Because I think what I sensed in our caucus was there was much more comfort from the staff to move administrative decisions to the administrative bodies than there was from the elected officials. And so I think that's probably the piece you're going to see tomorrow. I wonder, and I'd be curious with this group, but I'll leave the discussion up to you. If the legislature wants to fight the fight with the public, that more public input is bad, we should let them fight that fight. I think if we can come to some ground on the administrative, what decisions should be held by the administrative body versus the legislative bodies. I think there's some reason in exploring that, but I don't see why we need to be in front of the public comment piece. I don't think it's going to pass the smell test with the public. Let them fight that fight. And I don't know if that's an option for us or not.
As long as the legislature doesn't use the narrative that cities want us to cover them. Listen, the cities are tired of you pushing back on what they're trying to do, so they can't do what they need to do. So they want us to cover them so that, so that they don't have to deal with you coming back and pushing back, because I'm afraid that's the framing that will come as a result of it. But you're totally right. You're absolutely right. Let them fight that fight. But they're going to put us in front of it. They're going to put us in the middle of it, and it'll come back to us. I really
There's
think.
no frame it that way.
Mhm.
Because they were already framing it that way.
Mayor, can I add one piece here to what Gary just said? Because I tried to clarify this in my caucus, but it's really difficult. And it's in part my fault back at LPC a few weeks ago when we first broached this topic. I agree that you as elected officials do not want to be in a position where you are perceived as taking away the public's voice. But I also think the current system often does you a disservice as elected officials when residents show up to a public hearing thinking they can do something about a vote that you are planning to do. And you are in that catch-22 of, we have to apply this standard, but the residents are here pushing back on us. I'm responsive to the public. And so to me, part of the reason we internally isolated this issue is one that we thought was worth leading out on proactively, was just to better clarify for the public and for the elected officials how the process best works. And that's why we don't have a draft for you yet, because this is a pretty big sea change in how we do land use. But it could turn into a win-win for all of our communities that also satisfies the governor's initiative to say, we want bold policy and good policy, but we don't want to do it in a way that sacrifices public input entirely. So that's the balance that we're trying to strike as staff. And that's why we came to the conclusion that we needed to make it a centerpiece of the dialogue at the conference today. Councilor Knuckles.
Yeah, well, perspective from smaller cities is, we know pretty well everyone in our own entire town. We know their kids, we know who's graduating, we know who's sick, we know everything about them. And so when they come to talk, whether it's just in general or at a public meeting, they're talking to you not just as their elected official, but as your friend or someone you go to church with or your kids go to school with. And so I think that public comment builds public trust. And we don't want to do away with that. Now, that being said, we also don't want the public taking over our meetings. And so by limiting public comment and letting them know upfront, we do want to hear from you. We are happy to hear from you. But when this time frame has stopped, this now becomes the public. That's the public meeting. Now we're in a council meeting. And this is only for council, and recognizing the boundary between when input is given and then when that legislative body then resumes its responsibilities. And we find that distinguishing time frame helps our residents realize we know you've heard us, but you are going to make a decision.
So Mayor, as part of the counter proposal, we think we as staff, our recommendation is to build a proposal that better clarifies the administrative process and where the public input best fits in that process, and maybe even distinguishing between conditional use permits and site plans, recognizing that not all administrative processes are the same for obvious reasons, right? And then asking that question of the role of the public body in each of those spaces, and have that proposal be able to bring back to LPC for consideration on the 17th. But we want to make sure that we as a group, that this board is comfortable giving that direction and make sure we know what that sandbox is here before we start putting the exact concepts on paper. Todd, anything else you want to add there?
That's a quick question. So on administrative versus legislative, I think we have an amazing staff in our community development department. I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have a planning degree. I rely on those experts. And do you have a problem, some of you, with your elected officials thinking they know best? It's not just me.
I think it gets smaller or not smaller. I think it gets bigger in smaller towns. For example, my council, they want to be the legislative and the administrative because they hold that role, they hold the title, and they can be the hero. In some cases, they can go and lay down the law with someone, but they can also be the bad guy too, and they like that, some of them. And to Carrie's point of just knowing everybody, I think that complicates it even more, because no matter what you do, they're going to come to my house. What they want to say. I'm going to call my cell phone because they can look it up on LDS tools or whatever it is. We're all in the same space, so it matters. So I don't know if that changes, but it complicates it as well.
No.
It's small places.
Well, and Mayor, to Mayor Monson's point, one of the ideas we've chewed on internally has been that maybe you distinguish between classification of city, classification of
I think that's a
land
vital
use
point.
authority.
Yeah.
In fact, Todd brought this up at the land use task force meeting a couple of weeks ago, based on all the calls he fields from our members around the state that, maybe we delineate. That also gets to Gary's point of the administrative professionals making administrative decisions, because how big is your staff in Blanding, Mayor Monson? And it's the biggest municipality in the county, right?
I think that's an important point for all those reasons. That's everything I was just thinking. I'm like, well, I have the same opportunity that you do, and some of us here do have communities with a large enough professional staff that that's absolutely who I think should be overseeing this. Not everyone, even in this room, certainly not everyone in the state has that. And so I think the classification on size of city matters, because how do you say we're going to make sure that we let our professional staff do this if you don't even have one? Right?
When considering this big question, I think it's a big question. I want to put Todd on the spot again, because he said something in our caucus that really framed it well for us. There was a lot of discussion about, are we going to get pumped by the legislature if we take this action or don't take that action? And can you remember what you said?
I'm kind of tired of considering this whole sort of administrative rework in the context of the hot seat we're on with the ULCT, start talking about their land use policy. And we lose track of that a lot of times because we're reacting so often to these kind of proposals, but we need to start thinking about a good, solid land use legal policy. And I'll just weigh in a little bit and tell you what I think. I think it is good policy to structure the comment and the receipt of it in a way that doesn't set our elected officials up to fail. That's the first step. I think that's important. I think when we invite people to public hearings and we have them comment, and there's already a list of standards that really dictate how we consider an application, we're doing our land use authority and the public a disservice, right? We're setting the whole system up to fail, because come and talk to us, but that decision is dictated by these policies and go on. That's hard. So I think from my perspective, reworking our administrative land use processes is good policy, and it's something we ought to be talking about. And independent of the hot seat we're on with the ULC, this is a discussion that's worthy of having for that reason. We can make better policy. We can establish a better framework that creates a land use process that helps everybody, as opposed to putting them in those horrible positions. And at the same time, what if it ends up being more, I guess, predictable for everybody in the process, both from an outcome and a timing perspective? Wouldn't that be good too? And I think maybe there's a chance to do that here. And I'm not sure we're giving that all the consideration that we could. Because we feel like we're on the hot seat, wherever again, we're reacting to offensive with the PRC folks in the legislature to some extent. Let's talk about the legal policy.
Nah.
I feel like the minutes need to reflect that came from Mayor Silvestrini.
I think it does too. I think it's good. I don't want to be blamed for the next.
Yeah.
Kidding. No, it's good. That's funny.
Ask a question. So let me share a short story with you. So up in Bear Lake, you probably all heard about the 500 RV resort that was all over the news. And we done a zone change. We tried to educate people that this RV park was better fitted than 800 short-term rental homes in the area, less impactful than 8-month RV park. We had a public hearing, P&Z did, standing room only, 150 plus people. 10 out of those 150 people were residents of our city. The rest of them were second homeowners who had no voting rights in our city, that were contesting that. They took it as far as a referendum to overturn the zone change. It was a nightmare. I don't know if you've been through a referendum in your, but it is a nightmare. It only takes about 12 signatures from people that don't even live in your city. I could contest something up in Mill Creek and be a part of that if I don't like it. So what I'm saying is what's public comment is that, who do you listen to? Second homeowners that, hey, I've got my piece of the pie, I don't want anybody else coming in, or is it full-time residents? We deal with a whole, one size doesn't fit all, I guess is what I'm saying. We deal with a whole different realm, and I'm sure other resort cities do the same thing.
Excellent points. But we are at the decision point, because all jokes aside, we need to draft a proposal. And this is the type of item, with all due respect to everything else on the list, which we'll get to. This is the type of item that we can walk in. And so I'll come back to Todd's overarching point in a second. But this is the sort of item that we can walk into the governor's office and say, this is a systemic improvement for how we do land use. And it's bold, but it's also good policy. And I think the governor would say, yeah, you're right. And then would give us the flexibility to make sure we get it right. Because we're not going to get it right between now and October 17th. But we do need to start fleshing those concepts out. But we wanted to make sure you had the chance to hear from the cities you represent today before we brought this to you tonight, to give us that direction to start drafting a framework around the role of public input, the role of legislative body within the administrative land use process. Again, with the ultimate objective of getting to good land use policy.
Cam, do you think you can hold the line on this one? If we were to move forward this policy, can we hold it? Can we not move the goalpost? It's the same question I asked Todd and posed in my caucus meeting is just, can we put this in place and hold it, or will this erode and erode and erode? And that to me is key. So I think I can agree on Todd's comment about doing it because it's the right process, and it makes it clear and fair and puts people in the right lanes. But I worry that every time we try and draw a line, the next session and the next session, it just erodes. And so every time we put something in statute, more the legislature erodes. And so you feel like, given the push that have been sent our way, that if you were to bring this proposal, that you could extract something on the other side that this governor, this speaker, and this president will hold, and not, we won't find this new statute eroded the next couple of sessions.
I think this is the type of proposal that allows that conversation. I think there are other proposals that we've discussed in the past few years that don't rise to the level of a systemic change. This is a systemic change. This conversation is a systemic change of how we exercise that administrative work. So I do think we could go to the current speaker and to the current governor and to the others who are heavily involved and say, we're committed to clarifying this process, bringing predictability to it and clarifying roles, but recognize that this is not we're doing this now and then 3 months from now we're doing something different in this space. Like, actually let this work and see what the outcomes are. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody where I said, this is actually bigger than attainable housing. This really is about improving land use processes in general, housing being a piece in the land use puzzle. So I think, honestly, I think some of them would be surprised if we walked in their offices and said, this is what we'd like to do. But I've had enough behind the scenes conversations leading up to this board meeting where there's some interest at high levels in what we come back with here. And I've made it clear to them, like, we're having the 30,000 foot conversation, but just give it, basically just took their temperature and they were intrigued.
It's tough to answer your question, Kate, because we're in an environment, unfortunately, I think, where people don't have the patience. They see that we have a housing problem. and they don't have the patience to even give the things that we've tried a chance to work, like broken record for me, House Bill 462, okay? I think that has to be part of our messaging on this, is that, you know, I mean, number one, this is good policy. We can justify it on that basis, and frankly, there's a reason to move forward on that basis. But I do think that we need to couple that with a message that, look, you know, we're doing all these things, but it doesn't make sense to keep running around trying new stuff before we know if the old stuff works. Where does that end? I don't know if that's a message that will sell, but it is a message that we've been starting to voice even with 462.
We're whipsawed, but the public is whipsawed too. The public deserves to have easy to follow paths for what their options are. I mean, they never lose their First Amendment right to redress a grievance. Even if we move something to an administrative process, they just need to know where to send it.
That's right. Yep. Well said. So again.
So we're clear as mud. What do you need from us?
Well, we need to know that this board is comfortable with us drafting some concepts in this space around the role of public input, the role of legislative body, and land use authority process. Because I feel like at this point, we've had tremendous philosophical conversation, and we've had really good conversation about consequences. It's now or never.
I know, it needs to translate into policy proposal.
We either need to build the proposal or not. And this, I think this also gives us some flexibility on the other pieces that we'll get to here in a second. So I'd actually like to have a vote to take direction on this piece separate from the rest of it, because this is big.
The other thing I think that argues for us doing this on the administrative stuff is that it's a significant offering toward coming up with an effective answer by all of our cities. And it actually may insulate us from other bad things that are out there that are being proposed. If we can offer this and say, look, this is our solution to this, let's try this, then maybe we won't have, you know, highway funds tied to some arbitrary thing that because that's the kinds of things that are out there that the PRC is going to be lobbying for are things that are far worse than this.
I try a motion. Motion light. I'm just gonna throw this out there and see how.
Motion light, I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say some words and we're gonna see if they look great. So I guess my motion would be that we give staff the authority to negotiate that some administrative decisions can't be considered by the legislative body. I'm just trying to think of the right word, but essentially they've got to be considered administratively. The legislative body can't be the body that makes those decisions, with exceptions for certain size communities. And then the second, that we are willing to discuss how to streamline public comment for those same administrative decisions.
I'd second that.
Member Shepherd.
I'm totally not married to that. I'm not going to offend me if people don't want to do that, but.
Well, let's talk about it. We have a motion light and a second light on the table. Feedback, your thoughts?
Well, and really what I think what we're talking about is giving, not only negotiating at this point, but giving staff direction to draft something that I presume would be reviewed by at LPC on the 17th.
Yeah, that would be our intent.
I think that's a safe thing for us to do, just because we'll get a chance to look at what they might actually come up with and see.
Yeah, substitute motion. Gary's motion plus negotiating principle of asking legislators and the governor to hold the line on any further erosion. And then I have a question to Gary. On your talk about cities of certain size, where do you think that line ought to exist? Is it fifth class? Is it?
Well, I think
third class?
I think everybody but first class cities should be exempt.
First class cities and counties are.
I really would prefer to maybe the caucuses, the conversation, because I think there was a delineation that was below the established mid-sized cities. We were pretty comfortable with this concept, but I think you get to certain rural sites, and Mayor, I don't know, I would certainly include. But I don't know where that will third.
Molly.
So we were in establishment. That might be helpful.
Although I agree with you, and I like that. My only note of caution perhaps is that one of the communities that might be specifically thought of by some of the people who are pretty passionate about this in the legislature, I think is a small enough community that it would exempt them, and that might become frustrating.
What I'm
That's not what I mean, but
what I'm hearing in the motion is acknowledge the varying comments we got from caucuses. That's why we did it, right? Is to get that feedback and figure out what makes sense. I don't have a good answer for what that is right now. I would just be guessing, but that's why Todd's here.
And I would say that was my part. Like, without putting a line on that one, we can live. We'll bring something back and see what it's like.
And for me, I think along with the rural side of things, I think it's a fine line to walk on exemptions versus being left out of the conversation completely. If at one point you get to the point where you're exempt, you need to follow then. So that's hard too, because you have to have something, but does it need to be the same as everybody else? So that's hard, but I agree.
the question, do you have any recommendations you'd like to bring as to what might be appropriate for those?
I'm okay with us working on that as opposed to trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think it's solid.
Okay. We have a substitute motion, light, and second, I don't know. But
Light /
yeah.
It's light and heavy.
Yeah. We have a heavy substitute motion, light. And a second. Any additional discussion on that? And that is to give the staff authorization and direction to craft policy proposals that will be brought to LPC on what we've just talked about, right? What we've gone over, along with what I think is a bold request, an appropriate, timely request, but a bold request to ask them to hold the line for a little bit and let us try to see how everything that's been happening actually works, Any additional discussion?
Would you identify a time frame for that in terms of holding the line? Because, somebody said, time to work, it's ought to be, we got to see the evidence in 12 months. And maybe that's not at all realistic.
If I were to propose something that would be realistic, I mean, the legislative session ends in March. We're all in budget session in April, May, June. If you were going to have to amend your ordinances to apply, you're going to not even really be able to start that heavy work until third quarter, fourth quarter of 2023. And that's, if you're not doing anything else like a general plan or any other significant policies. So I would suggest that we ask them, let's pull a PRC move. We need a 5-year window. And then maybe be willing to accept something in like a 3, but I think you're going to need to see at least 2 years for cities to work through identifying, modifying their ordinances and training at a minimum.
By law, will take that long.
I'd say a minimum of 3.
Very good clarifier.
I was also just gonna say, it's interesting. I think if the Federal Reserve keeps changing interest rates and stuff, the discussion in a year or two may be totally different.
Yep.
Like affordable housing, there's a chance it won't be as much of an issue as it is now. And, so I think definitely allowing things time, let's see what happens, I don't think that, so it's just interesting.
Good point. Thank you.
Councilman Bradshaw, clarifying question. If I could.
He always works, go for it.
I know, but it's for, when you say hold the line, how broadly are you talking about? Because we have a whole lot of land use discussion, a whole lot of land use.
This provision.
Just this provision.
The administrative land use authority, I agree to be able. I'd like you to negotiate no changes to anything involving what he cares about for the next 5 years. Like, that is my.
That's the PRC.
Yeah.
I think this particular section of code is a very slippery, dangerous slope, and it. I can intellectually agree with all the arguments I heard Todd make in our caucus meeting, and just have pretty deep-seated worry from the things I've seen happen at the state capitol. Mr. Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Okay. Okay, any additional discussion? Everybody understand the motion that's on the table? The substitute motion that's on the table? Okay, all in favor of approving the motion on the table? I'm not going to re-describe the whole thing, but again, if you have any questions about it, we'll clarify. All in favor of approving the substitute motion as it is before us, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, not just for the conversation here, but really the conversation all day. We had our first meeting on this at 7:30 this morning, but it's been, every meeting has exposed a different piece, which has been really, really helpful. The next thing on the table that we wanted to hit that was on the agenda specifically was the consequences around House Bill 462. Carson, what is the latest and greatest number of submissions for House Bill 462 to DWS?
To my knowledge, we're still at 71 out of 73, 83 aspirants cities need to comply. I haven't heard any updates about any new entities, but I know the AOGs are doing outreach to their respective cities.
Okay, so 83 cities, including most in this room, have to comply with House Bill 462, funding for modern income housing compliance. It's the extension from SB 34. Of those, 71 met the deadline to submit the report to DWS. So 12 did not. Now, the reason he mentioned the asterisk was because DWS's data may be a little off in terms of the universe who has to comply based on population. And Ogden City, for example, was on the initial naughty list that they sent to us. But then as soon as I got it, I texted Mara, and within an hour, I had the forward confirmation email from Ogden City that they'd submitted. Right. So that was the follow-up we were doing earlier this week as the deadline came this past weekend. I bring that up, and then not every city that submitted a report is ultimately going to comply because you have to have an implementation component, and that's what we'll see here over the next few weeks. DWS will have to do their report by December 1. The PRC has proposed multiple carrots and sticks, and the co-chairs of the Commission on Housing Affordability have asked us, are there carrots and sticks that you guys could live with? We've said we think the TIF is a significant carrot, the eligibility for the TIF. They said, is there anything else? So we have a couple of concepts to bring to you that, again, if you give your direction tonight, we'll go full speed ahead on them. One is the carrot piece, and this is the most time sensitive of the two because it's the more fleshed out. The legislature in 2018 passed SB 136, which authorized the fifth for transit in counties that have imposed all 4 county option quarters for transportation and have transit in their counties. Okay. And so that's not San Juan County. It is now Davis County. The reason I say now is part of the reason it was designed that way is there were several counties that had not yet imposed all 4 quarters. So it was supposed to be a carrot to get the 4 quarters imposed. Because then you could access this fifth, and it's a fifth because it's 0.20, not 0.25. The legislature in SB 136 put a sunset on this authorization, and it sunsets in June. So if Davis County, Utah County, Salt Lake County, Weber County, and others don't impose this by June, then it expires. Which means if the tax authorization expires, good luck going back to the legislature and getting another authorization for transportation. So through the UEOC, Mayor Ramsey and I brought this up on several occasions. So we need to at least look at that sunset. Now that 0.20 is currently 100% to transit for service delivery and capital expenses. Well, what we have discussed with Representative Schultz has been, if you're opening this up in order to extend the sunset, does it also make sense to open it up to potentially use that 0.20 for other uses and potentially share it with municipalities, similar to what we did with the fourth quarter 7 years ago? At the last UEOC growth subgroup meeting, Representative Schultz publicly said he thought it made sense to open that fifth up and potentially share money with cities and counties as long as transit got a significant piece of it. Notice I haven't put any numbers on the table yet. Okay. At the UEOC last week, so we put this before you 2 weeks ago as support dialogue. And then Representative Schultz last week got the UEOC to endorse examining the fifth.
Not endorse. We were successful at getting the word endorsed into support.
That's right, support. Thank
For
you for
every
reminding me.
UEOC
Yeah.
vote. Which
Yes, you're
is
right.
significant.
Yeah, thank you
Well
for reminding me. Yes.
Mhm.
So to support opening up the fifth. We have not shared what I'm about to say to you with Representative Schultz. We've only talked to him about just opening up the fifth. But our staff recommendation to this body that we think makes sense would be to say that fifth, a portion would go to cities, portion would go to counties, and a portion would go to UTA, similar to the fourth quarter. And by UTA, I looked over here, I saw the glare, back-to-back glare from the mayor and Sean to transit.
That wasn't glare.
No. But the caveat would be for that city piece, that cities would only get those fifth dollars if they're compliant with 462. So now it becomes a carrot for 462 compliance. So keep in mind that right now, if Davis County were to impose that fifth today, 100% would go to transit. Under this concept, if Davis County were to impose it, Davis County would keep a portion that they would have flexibility to spend, but then Bountiful and Fruit Heights and Kaysville and Clearfield would be eligible for a portion of it, so long as that city is compliant with House Bill 462. And then the other piece would go to transit. And it's not just a UTA piece, because there's only one county that's actually acted on this thus far. It was Summit County for purposes of high mountain transit in their unincorporated area. So that is our recommendation on the carrot side, to take this existing authorization, repurpose it, get cities involved in it, but then turn it into a 462 carrot.
And I think that the rationale that we had for considering this is an opportunity to provide an incentive for cities that comply with 462, comprised of new revenue rather than what's been proposed before by certain interests about withholding Class B and C funds or other punitive measures. So this way we're not going to be disadvantaging a city that's already dependent upon a revenue source. This would be essentially a new one, but it could be used that way. So I think it will have appeal to those that want to see other revenue sources subject to a stick approach.
Thank you. Good explanation. Thoughts? I like this. And I think Representative Schultz will potentially be surprised at this idea and might be really open to it. Because I do think it's something that, as communities, we're all hoping for as much as we can get, for our roads. And if a portion of that could be afforded to cities, it might be a great carrot to help with motivation in compliance with 462. So
what's the downside? Why wouldn't we support this immediately?
What is your note about state infrastructure? Bank?
Yeah, so the state infrastructure bank right now is all but $5 million is encumbered. And there's been discussion through the UEOC of investing significant state money into the state infrastructure bank and expanding the use. Right now, it's primarily for transportation or parking garages, but expanding the use to water and sewer. So part of our thought here was also having 462 compliance tied to that, similar to the TIF. Now, just so you're aware, we surveyed this concept in August. We didn't call it the fifth, but we surveyed this concept with the members saying, and we asked it in several ways. The first question was, would you support additional revenue streams for transportation? Obviously, that came back really well. The next question, though, was, would you support a new authorization tied to 462 compliance? It didn't score as well, but it was still in that medium zone. So we feel like the membership would obviously prefer to access dollars without the 462 compliance, but it's in that middle zone for us. And I think politically, I think it would surprise some folks.
It's a space we can work in that might be well received, and that's what we're desperate to find at this point.
Well, we've had some preliminary conversations with county leaders in the urban area, as well as UTA leaders in the county.
Potential challenges with getting counties to impose it.
Right, yeah. And that was actually part of the thought process. Is back in the days of the fourth quarter, all of the counties in the urban area asked their cities to step up and speak out in support of it. If Mayor Caldwell were here, he would talk about his face being on 100,000 flyers in Weber County. Well, the fifth, if it's 100% to transit, it's probably less likely that city leaders are going to step up in the way that city leaders stepped up in 2015 and subsequent years. But if everybody's at the table like we were on the fourth quarter, then it's more likely to have the coalition in order to do this. The other thing that's important to know that sunset is, at this point, no UTA county has indicated that they are planning to impose it. Several were having conversations about it, but trying to figure out the politics, because obviously right now with inflation and all the other challenges, this is a really tough time to come forward with a sales tax increase. So at the very least, that sunset needed to be pushed out just for political realities. And UTA has told us that they're open to this conversation as well, because they see the holistic approach if the city piece is tied to 462. No, there's no vote approval. This is purely county, purely county imposition. So we'd welcome a motion to say, yes, we want to go in this direction, because this would be the first time that we've ever said, yeah, we want these guardrails on these dollars, but we think it's appropriate because it would be new money, and it would be repurposing that existing authorization. So it's not actually a new tax, but it brings everybody to the table in a holistic way to plan for growth. I thought I saw.
I may have missed this because I was trying to multitask.
Because he was glaring.
Glare, yeah, I saw the glare.
So for those counties that have imposed it already, what would that mean? For those cities?
So the only county that's opposed it thus far is Summit County. And the answer is to be determined, because if the legislature comes back and repurposes it, then we'd have to have that conversation of, do you repurpose what they've already imposed, or is that grandfathered in?
Okay, just want to make sure that Summit County didn't lower rates and this is the direction we want to go, that we have that preliminary discussion.
Yep, have not talked to them yet, but yeah, we.
That is a good question. Yeah.
Would they have bonded against that revenue stream already in Summit?
I think they just imposed it this past summer. So it's still relatively new. Yeah.
Well, just, you can't make sure that the county's already bonded against that.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine, because Davis hasn't done it. It's great, I'd like to.
It speaks to Gary's question, like, is there a downside? It's nice if we get it, but we don't lose anything if we don't. So it's a political thing to offer that we really don't lose.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time imagining UTA wouldn't be supportive, because at this point, none of the counties that they service have even imposed this. So right now they're getting nothing from it.
Right.
So if they work with us, they may get less than they would have, but otherwise they're probably going to get nothing, right? So it probably serves their best interest to be supportive of this as well. But I think we do have some work to do, continued work to do with counties to get the counties to impose it.
Okay, so yeah, we vote.
So you want a motion to direction to propose this? Is that what you're?
Yeah, to officially propose repurposing it, but with the 462
So
time.
I'll make a motion to give staff direction to propose, make a proposal to extend the sunset on the fifth, and to repurpose and to permit it to be repurposed to be divided among transit counties and cities, and the city portion tied to 462 compliance.
Well said. That was good.
What was the last line? Could you repeat the last line? Like for cities.
Have it tied to 462 compliance.
I thought you were making me repeat the whole thing.
I'm not even
Roll the
gonna,
tape.
yeah, yeah. We have a motion and a second on the table. Any additional discussion? Mayor Walker?
No.
No? Okay. Anyone else? All right, all in favor of this motion as it's been presented, which I will not as eloquently reiterate, it was very well said. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Perfect. So those are two critical pieces that we think are proactive, bold, but good policy, and get to good planning outcomes. Now, the rest of this chart, I will quickly summarize because those are the pieces we needed the most discussion on today. You'll see what's listed as a tightened report for non-compliant cities, and then a number 5, local land use process timeliness of the expedited moderate income housing process. That's highlighted in gold because we surveyed that question and it came back right actually in the somewhat comfortable space with some sort of state process or some state requirement to expedite land use process for moderate income housing. Now, we didn't ask exactly what that looked like, but we've been trying as staff thinking through different options of what that could look like. For example, one thing it could look like is if a city is not compliant with 462, that there would be a different time frame that then that city has to follow for moderate income housing projects that come before the city. So the simple way to think about that is the city either plans proactively for moderate income housing, or you plan reactively because the legislature has said, here's your time frame, or the ripcord that currently exists in law automatically applies, or potentially there's a default outcome where you're required to allow a certain type of use because you didn't proactively plan. We don't have a proposal for you on any of those 3 concepts, but that's been part of the internal discussion. Is our members said they were okay with an expedited moderate income housing process. So what could that look like? And could it be that that kicks in as a stick for non-compliance? Again, don't have something ready for you, but we'll continue brainstorming in that space. What's number 6, economic development and housing. This is one where we've actually strategically decided to just wait and watch and say, look, we got to neutral on House Bill 151. There was a housing component there with economic development. So you basically gave us our sandbox last year on that. And the proposal the PRC has floated actually came from a city ordinance. So at this point, we've just been watching and saying it does make sense to have economic development and housing integrated, so long as there's a recognition that that doesn't necessarily work everywhere if it's a redevelopment or something else. But that's what we've tried to be positive on and proactive on. Short-term rentals, we've talked about that one extensively through multiple groups. The last one's just a hit that we've highlighted here on property tax. We've had discussions within the league before about the residential deduction for multifamily, and this could require a constitutional amendment. But the concept here is sorry, Roger, what? Yeah, Roger says it would require a constitutional amendment. But the argument we often hear from the legislature is cities won't rezone to allow residential and commercial areas because you're not getting 100% property tax from the residential as like you are with the commercial. So we actually last year, as part of the retail incentives battle, contracted with Lewis Young to do some analysis of what it would mean financially if that 55% were changed for multifamily residential and what that would mean for cities. We had them, we pegged the number and then had them do that analysis. And it was really insightful and interesting analysis. In light of all of the discussions at the Capitol around property tax right now and everything from water to service districts to caps and everything else, we thought this was worthwhile to just bring up as part of that conversation, especially since we have some data about what it could look like, recognizing that there's some significant political challenges, but at least forces that conversation around property tax. Then the last couple of items, real estate transaction price disclosure, we surveyed this last year with the membership, and it was and it received support. Recognized politically, this would be a very tough sell, but the idea here is just getting to good data that's helping to drive policy discussions. The other one is state grants to reimburse city fees. This came up just last week as an idea where if the state created a fund of state dollars that Justin City could access, if Justin City waives certain fees for, say, owner occupied, moderate income housing, first time homebuyer units, that the state would then reimburse local fees. Is that a way to have, multiple people skin in the games for a certain type of housing production? We thought the idea had some merit, and that's why we've added it to our cross section here of our wireframe. Go ahead, Councilor.
Impact fees, or are you talking other types of things?
Yeah, I'd say for conversation purposes, any and all. The argument is always city fees drive up the cost of housing. In actuality, the incomplete data we have is fascinating. Ogden City, for example, doesn't have impact fees, right? So Ogden doesn't have impact fees, yet there's not a real noticeable difference between the cost of a house or the price of a house in Ogden versus North Ogden, which does have impact fees. Well, that said, if a city were to say, you know what, we'll waive the impact fees here, but we want the assurance that that gets passed on to the home buyer, and particularly for first-time home buyers, and then you could get state money to backfill it. Maybe that's a way to get everybody's skin in the game.
Well, and there's a precedent for that because of the legislation around impact fees, that if we waive impact fees for an agency, for ourselves, for example, another agency, we have to reimburse those ourselves already. So, I mean, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
So what you see in this middle column would be the counter proposal as of October 5th. That we'd fill in the gaps here, some of which is already moving. Like Sean has spent countless hours on the development standards piece, but we'd fill this in so we could take it back to the Land Use Task Force and the CHA later this month. But this board won't meet again before the next CHA meeting. So this really what we'd like is give the policy direction on. We talked about the two pieces in depth, but just say yes, either yes, this counter proposal framework makes sense, forward march, or there are things up here that causes some concern, and we prefer that not to be part of a counter proposal at this point.
All right.
And I realize it's 6:27, so this really is the last thing we're asking for.
Justin City a better actor than Cameron City?
It
Yeah,
sounds
that's why.
like it.
Yeah, that's why I referenced
Yeah.
Always trying to cover that bad actor.
that.
There isn't anything but affordable.
Years down.
Right, they're a mess, yeah. All right, can I get a motion on that? Are you prepared to make a motion?
I will make a motion to give direction to staff to pursue the wireframe network indicated on the exhibit, which is page 3 on what I have.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm actually giving it to Mayor Daines. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, great, okay. Motion and a second on the table. Any additional discussion to this? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so I said I was done, but we're not done because Justin, can you take just 1 minute on the water conservation? Just on the, just a quick update on water conservation, because this also is part of the wireframe. There's a lot of important discussions in water conservation and homelessness that we want to incorporate as part of the counter proposal. We won't go into detail on the homelessness piece. Where's Molly? Is there anything you need right now from this board on homelessness? Okay, so Justin on water.
We love you. I like Molly City.
Yeah.
City has the homeless.
I think Molly City is the only one with all the answers to the homeless situation.
So the only thing was I thought water. One of the, well, let me back up. along with the housing, one of the issues that's near and dear to the speaker's heart is water. So the question that we need to be asking and looking at are there things that we can do on water? Are there bills that may make sense, maybe things that we're already doing that we can codify that we could look at? That as part of these negotiations, we're not just saying one-to-one on housing, but hey, yeah, we know you feel like this on housing. Here's this water piece as well, though. This can make you happy. As part of the negotiation, we all wish and we all know that the policy should be made one subject one-to-one, but we know that's not how it works because people are involved. And so if there are ideas around, for example, non-functional turf, of what that could look like. I know we did a lot last year with Wilcox's bill and others, and this isn't something we necessarily need to answer right now, but there are things we can do in the water space that will help with conservation, that will particularly help Great Salt Lake. Even because ideas in that realm, then that's part of these negotiations we want to look at. That's something that's a good look. We can get out in front of that and not just wait for bills, but we can proactively bring up some good conservation ideas. Would love to hear those. Since I only have a minute, I don't think I can take public comment, but but feel free to jump in.
Even though we have the low hanging fruit, and one of the biggest low hanging fruit we have is the churches. One church for them. There are so many that are using water for nice spring grass. Now, when we live, you can go to desert landscape and look really well, but.
The new ones being built in South Jordan do have that. Yeah, they're not even putting sod in anymore.
Yeah.
The new ones that are coming in, but there's so many across the whole state that have them. Yeah.
I mean, just that alone would say that. That's cool.
So I've had some conversations with the legislature that represents my area who wants to do something on water. His motivation on that in part is that some of the federal money that whatever it's called now, the bipartisan infrastructure bill or whatever, there's money that's available in that bill for states to promote water conservation, and a huge chunk of that is going to go already to the Colorado River. But there's about a third of it that be available otherwise, and he wants to make sure that Utah gets its share of that, and exploring this, he's determined that on a federal level, Utah has a terrible reputation about being a water wasting state rather than a water rich state, and we've all those numbers may not be valid, but there are at least some argument that we use more water than some of our neighboring states, that are also as dry. So we are going to have some pressure on there, and there's going to be a question on what are cities willing to do? Would we be willing to go along with some kind of state mandated prohibition on what was the non-functional turf that you only walk on to mow, things like that. This merits further conversation with this particular legislature. We're going to try to show him all the bills that passed in the legislature last session related to water, and like what else really needs to be done to convince somebody in Washington that we're doing our part. But anyway, this is going to be an issue we're going to be dealing with.
Thank you. Sean and then Mayor Walker.
So we met with Chris Stewart, he was down in St. George on the 10th of September, and brought up the bill. And this is the one that Senator Sinema was able to get additional funding for drought relief. And we also have been talking to Senator Romney's office and Senator Lee's office too. And our message has been the same. And I think it'd be great if we could all be on the same message. And that is, we're afraid that all that money, no pun intended, is going to be sucked up by Arizona and California. And it's supposed to be for drought relief in the West. And so, and we've talked to our lobbyist too, Marcus Dowse with his team. And so they've already contacted our congressional delegation, but I think it'd be great as a league that we make that contact too, and to our congressional delegation and say, we want our fair share of that drought relief money. Otherwise, it will come to those plastic. In fact, you look at the bill, there are several projects that are already earmarked in that bill in Arizona and California, and for some of the Native Americans reservations. So we need need to get our fair share, so I think that would be my vote.
To support that claim, to back up what you just said, I also visited with Senator Romney about this, and he said we have an uphill battle to face because red states are going to have a harder time accessing any of this money than blue states. It's going to go to blue states first, which means Nevada is definitely going to have a higher ranking than Utah, no question. But especially if we're seen as not doing our part anyway, we're not doing enough anyway. I mean, he said, I'm ready to go to bat for Utah, and I want to get a part of this. I mean, took a lot of arrows for being part of that bipartisan infrastructure bill, and he wants to go to bat to try to help get some of that drought relief money here in Utah. But he needs all the help he can get because it's going to be a partisan issue. And then also having Utah being seen as we're over users anyway. He said, everything we can do is it's going to take, so I totally agree with that. And I think this is a good conversation to have. Okay, Mayor Walker.
I was just gonna say, what we've been doing in our city is we've teamed up with Jordan Valley. We're running those local scapes classes. We've done 4 or 5 rounds of them. But I mean, if we could focus on maybe making that easier in cities, I mean, it's a great way to get people to change their landscaping, and that doesn't necessarily have to be non-functional turf. They do a great job of teaching you ways to, my family, we were a guinea pig family on it. We did it. I cut my water bill more than in half in just this summer. But I think we ought to look to way to expand that. Maybe we try and spread that a little further around the state. They have a great program. They'll come in, you can have them in your city hall, and people can come in, learn how to. I think that might be a good way to start the conservation part, at least, and it's significant. I mean, you can. We did it, and we've had 4 other people in just our neighborhood do it, and so it started to catch on, and it'll save a substantial amount. Plus, it looks good. They do a really good job of, kind of teaching you how to do it. You don't have to just do rocks and things like that. But I think that's significant. We could make a difference there. I don't know if we tell the speaker, hey, give us a few dollars, we'll expand that program, and it'll come back to you in water savings and in federal grants.
It's been that exact same program's been really successful in our city too. When we hold those workshops and have Cynthia come and, do that, they've been really successful for us too.
Mayor Randall, can you give an update of what happened down in your neck of the woods with the cities within the Water Conservancy District?
We finally all passed the water conservation ordinance that all is pretty much the same with every city in the county. And it really applies to new development, but limited the size of turf you can have in your backyards. The front yards can't have turf. You have to have water, recirculating hot water meters, those kind of things. Just it'll make a huge difference. And then as far as St. Bridge Cities has gone, we this year we'll take out 10 acres of sod from park strips and parks that are just not being used. And our golf courses have gone to planting really tall fescue in the rough that only has to be mowed every so often and only watered once a week.
Thanks for nothing.
Hey, it ended up saving millions and millions and millions of gallons of water just doing that one thing.
How many golf balls can you get out? Golf balls.
Hey, at night I go out there with those headlamp and I find mom and I said, let's stand up.
There's a side hustle in the making.
Hey,
Brilliant.
but people are calling the district constantly, when is the turf rebate going to be in place? Because there are people that want to take out their.
What do you need from us on this? Thank you.
We don't need anything yet. We don't need a motion on this one yet. We need ideas. We need rain, so yeah, we can work on that. It always rains in Dustin City, but I don't know about that. We need ideas. And there's not a specific piece we need to negotiate on right now. But we need thoughts and ideas as we go into things. We can keep discussion going on this.
And there's the last thing I'll add, and I mean that, is that the state of Nevada last year, it banned non-functional turf in certain settings, but then had a 2-year runway to figure out exactly what it meant. And we know legislators have been looking at that in addition to what others have indicated. So We spent a lot of time on the other UEOC issues because they've been more ripe. But as you know, UEOC voted on a bunch of water stuff last week, which was still at the 30,000 foot level. But in the next few weeks,
There's a lot of
there'll be a lot more
discussion to
coming.
come. Yeah.
We all turn into looking like they.
I just want to ask, do we have an idea for those cities that have a secondary water system? How many of those are metered? Because there was something, I think, in the notes, and I couldn't find it just now, that said additional financial support for metering
Yes.
secondary water. And I think that would be really helpful for those communities that are still not metered on their secondary water.
So yeah, that is one of the things the UEOC water group has looked at is there's $250 million set aside. There's about 120 million more that would be needed to complete the project for all the metering. So they are trying to get more funding to finish that off. But there's also been discussions around particularly some smaller providers. There may be some exemptions there where the metering may not make as much sense. So yes, we tried to get some of those exemptions last year. This year, they're more amenable to that.
What about, just maybe need to be a bigger part is either through our sewer districts or cities that have their own municipal sewer treatment about water reuse, and maybe dedicating water reuse to go for those that are on the Wasatch Front to Great Salt Lake. And they're just trying to think of other ways that other systems that we control or serve on boards for that serve the speaker's goal about getting water to the places he wants water and that we want water. Because I want to continue to live on the Wasatch Front.
Yeah, there is.
And visit St. George appropriately, slowly on non-busy weekends.
And just spend money in lease.
Right.
Spend money on- Not stand on the grass, not play in golf courses.
And not control.
Yeah, I think that there has been some discussion around that. Casey Snyder's been looking at that in the legislative water commission. So I think there is some good discussion there. People have some really strong feelings about reuse.
One quick thing, and some of you cities may be doing it already, the AMI metering. So we got 12 in and many of us volunteered to be test dummies. And I was one of them. And I am on my phone all the time seeing how much water I'm using per day. It tells you every hour how much water you've used. And now I have to replace the toilet because my toilet in my master bathroom uses 3.16 gallons of water per flush. Per flush. It's criminal, really. So the front bathroom, the guest bathroom, it's 1.2 gallons. So obviously we have an antiquated toilet, but you can look at every single thing. Your shower, how much you're using during your shower, and your outdoor watering, and
I'm afraid that I don't have the bandwidth right now.
we're hoping to get into all of our residents within 3 years.
It's cool.
It forces you to conserve, especially when you're like, should I? Not sure.
No, I actually heard on the Wasatch Front we're supposed to flush twice to save the lake. Maybe,
Yeah. Less more sprinkle less.
I understand that's, yours flowing.
I pity you for having to look at those banners on your phone all the time. It's like, when is that gonna end for us?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Other business. I have one request for other business. I'm going to ask, we all have to go. It's time to go. In 2 days, I'm going to be quite the has-been, and I want to remember this group. So I want us to take a picture really quick before we go. And then I have just one other thing really quick, which actually nobody here has heard, and it's not a thing, it's just an idea I want to float, and I absolutely should have talked to Cam and Katie and everybody about even before even bringing this up. But I heard an idea today from the National League of Cities representative who was here, talked to our deputy city manager, and he came and talked to me. And anyway, it's just a thought I want to plant, and then you guys can veto it, or you can like it, or whatever, do whatever you want. So you know how we have that South Jordan booth, right? That's here, cute and fun and whatever. In Arizona, on the city's night, like the second night of the whatever, in Arizona, they actually put together a vendor booth area where every city does a booth. And you just, whatever you want it to be to represent your city, your area, bring your squeaky cheese, bring your whatever, whatever your thing is in your community, just something, just set up something simple. But that's the party they have. Instead of paying for entertainment and a big dinner, every city does their own little booth, their own, represent your town, represent your city, and set something up, and it becomes quite a, I guess it's become quite a thing. I'd love to see how Arizona does it, but it's a party. And yeah, no. No, you gotta have your council man the whole thing and nobody else does, nobody, yeah. But no, anyway, I just thought that is such a fun idea. That could be kind of cool. So I just thought I'd plant that, even though nobody's heard it. And now I'm probably, what are they gonna do? I'm out in 2 days anyway. They can't fire me.
We still another year.
Yeah, so anyway.
We sent the immediate past president to Arizona to check out what.
I think so. I would do that. I would love to see it.
They're confident.
Yeah. Oh, the Hawaii does it. I'd like to see that too.
So just 2 quick clarifying notes. The Arizona conference is in
2
August.
quick clarifying notes. We're not doing
No,
that,
no.
and we're not, yeah,
No.
she had no, yeah.
No, the Arizona conference is in August in Scottsdale, and the reason they do it in August in Scottsdale.
So
is
nobody
cheaper
would come?
freights, Yeah. But,
Sounds terrible.
but they actually have a flag ceremony where every city comes in with their city flag. It's really cool. I've seen videos of it. Second thing, someone brought up Hawaii. Hawaii is the one state that does not have a municipal league, so we can't send you to a conference in Hawaii.
But you're gonna send me to Scottsdale in August? That sounds appropriate for bringing up an idea that no one's ever heard. Fair enough. Anyway, I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn, and then I'm gonna ask if we can take a quick picture. Nick?
Just very quickly on other business, these plants you'll see in front of you are board gifts, so go ahead and grab that on your way out. And as we mentioned our sponsors before, but as you were spending some time in the exhibit hall today, when you see that sponsor section, if you want to pop in and say, I'm a board member with the league, thank you for all you do. We really appreciate that support. So that's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn to a picture.
Okay, all in favor?
Let's just do a picture right back.
We're adjourned. We're adjourned. Do you mind if we take it really
Right
quick
here?
right here?